I have the pleasure now to welcome Sarah Brocq. Sarah really wanted to be here. She spent yesterday evening sitting in Bradford Leeds Airport trying to get a flight that never left. So I want to acknowledge her efforts to be here and thank her for joining us remotely as a result of not being able to fly yesterday evening. So thank you very much, Sarah. Sarah is an advocate for people living with obesity, and she is the founder of an organisation called All About Obesity. That's an organisation that provides information, education and resources to people living with obesity, to health professionals and to policymakers. And Sarah has a unique mix of skill sets in that she lives with obesity herself. She's also a scientist, and then of course she's a director of an obesity charity. And she's going to speak to us today about her experience of living with obesity, and she's going to talk specifically to her experience of going through the process of being pregnant in the healthcare setting and how she was treated during that time. Sarah, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Great, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yeah, just to echo, I'm so sorry that I can't be with you. Unfortunately, the fog meant that the plane just could not leave Bradford. So unfortunately, you're going to have to just see me on screen. But I'm really privileged to be part of this meeting. And so thank you so much for inviting me along. So yeah, just going to talk to you today about kind of my experience of living with obesity and stigma, but specifically around my journey whilst I was pregnant. So next slide, please. So I just thought I'd start with a little bit. I mean, lots of people probably know my story now, but for those of you that don't, just thought I'd start with this picture always upsets me now, really, when I look back, because I remember this picture being taken. I was about 12 or 13 years old. And I remember just seeing this picture and just hating the way I looked. And it's quite pivotal because I made this dress at school. So that's why I'm stood there in my little dress that I'd made in home economics. And I look back now and I just think, gosh, Sarah, you just had boobs and hips and you developed kind of much quicker than your friends, which is why I felt different and which is why I didn't like my body shape, because it was different to everybody else's. So I've kind of spent most of my life not liking the way I looked, pretty much hating the way I looked, really, and battling with my weight. And I just think, why is this? Why did I feel that way so young? And I think, Stuart's touched upon it already, is, society and the messaging that we have out there about people living in larger bodies and about us not being really acceptable in society, makes us want to strive to be something that we're not. And I think we really need to change this narrative, because had I just embraced who I was back then, embraced my curves and hips, and not then embarked on every diet that I could possibly get my hands on, would I actually be living with obesity right now? Who knows? I think I would have always lived in a slightly larger body, but I don't know if I'd be the size that I am now. And I just think that's really interesting. And kind of, as I say, the picture makes me feel quite sad looking back, really. Next slide, please. So 10 years ago, I embarked on a weight loss TV show. So I'd kind of done various diets at this point, lost weight, put it back on again. And an opportunity arose for me to take part in a weight loss TV show. So I thought this literally was going to be the answer to my prayers, really. I was going to be able to lose a lot of weight, change my life and skip off into the sunset, a much smaller version of myself. Next slide, please. So they put us through our paces on the show. It was a case of changing our diet completely, but also making us change our activity levels and get us into exercise. So I went from doing no exercise really at all to completing an Olympic distance triathlon at the end of the programme. So that's a mile swim, a 40k bike ride and a 10k run. And I also found out how strong I was, because I think when you're living in a larger body, well, I definitely used to feel like my body wasn't really that useful. But actually, I found out that actually I was really quite strong. So I was deadlifting 100 kg quite easily. Next slide, please. But what I did find after the show, that even though I'd had that, what everyone would deem as success, I'd lost a lot of weight. I'd lost 8.5 stone over a 9-month period, and obviously had got really fit. I found out that actually losing weight wasn't the answer, because I still didn't really like the way that I looked. I wanted to still be smaller. I was striving to be an even smaller version of myself, again, with this messaging that we have, because I still wasn't a size 10. So I was still trying to get there. And what I found over the next kind of 3 to 4 years was, despite me still continuing to train really hard because I'd really enjoyed the exercise element and really enjoyed seeing what my body was capable of, my weight started coming back on. And I started feeling really quite down. I felt like a failure. I felt out of control. And I didn't know what to do because I was, doing what everyone had told me to do. I was eating less. I was moving more. So why was my weight coming back on? I went to see my GP. They said that there was nothing they could do. They were kind of like, well, you're doing everything we tell you to do. There's nothing really we can do to help you. And there were times where I really just didn't want to be here anymore because I was like, well, if this is how my life's going to be, that I'm going to just feel miserable. And no matter what I do, I'm going to feel like this. Like, what's the point? And I just think it's really sad looking back, thinking all of that just because of the way I looked, really, and the way that society makes us feel that we don't fit in. It's quite scary, really. Next slide, please. But my background is in science. I always like to understand why something's happening. So during this time, I was kind of like, this can't be this simple, that it's just about what I'm eating and the amount of exercise I'm doing. So I wanted to understand why. So I started looking at some of the clinical evidence and the data and the papers around obesity and started to understand that actually it was a lot more complicated than I realized, and that there were lots of things at play, like physiological things, psychological, and elements of it that were completely out of my control. And it was kind of understanding that made me kind of go, okay, so this isn't actually like a failing of me. Like there's other things at play here and things that I can't control. And so I found out that obviously obesity is very complex. And it's absolutely not a case of just eating less and moving more. And I know, again, Stuart touched upon this with the Foresight report and showing all the different factors involved there. Next slide, please. And I think another person that I work quite closely with is Dr. Giles Year, and he talks about the fact that obesity and body weight is not a choice. And when I say this to people, they really look at me as if to say, well, yes, it is, Sarah, you're choosing what you're eating. But he explains it in the fact that there's lots of, it's not a choice, it's a result of subtle variations across hundreds of genes. So height has a heritability, for instance, of 85%. And we all we don't question why someone's tall or short or medium, or we just go, oh yeah, it's just the way they are. It's their genes, it's the genetic makeup. And body weight has a heritability of 70%. Yet we blame that individual as if they had a choice over that. And I just think understanding the genetics kind of always blows my mind a little bit, that we need to really stop blaming individuals for choosing, because we don't do it with height, for instance. We don't blame them for being short or tall. So why do we do it with regards to body weight when it's determined by so many factors that are completely out of our control, yet we still blame and shame individuals like they had a choice for it to be different? So this really needs to stop, and we need to understand the complexities of obesity a lot more. Next slide, please. Sorry, 2 seconds. My dogs are going mental. 2 seconds. Sorry about that, everyone. Someone knocked on the door and the dogs went mental. So my story, kind of going on to now kind of the pregnancy side of things, so my clock was ticking. I was mid-30s, and I really knew I wanted to be a mum. That's something I'd kind of always known, but I'd always thought, oh, there's plenty of time. And also I think because I struggled with my weight, I'd spent most of my life thinking, well, once I got slimmer, that's when I'll start thinking about having a baby and losing weight. But then I thought, no, clock's ticking. I've got to start thinking about this now. I need to, if this is what I want to do, I need to kind of start working on that. So after 2 years of trying to have a baby with no success, I went to see my GP to have a conversation about, what can you do to help me, support me? Is there anything that you can, is there anything we can look at to find out why it's not happening? And basically I was met with the conversation of, well, how about you lose some weight? Because I think that'll be the answer. And if you can lose some weight, I'm sure things will happen. And obviously when you're someone that's living with obesity and has tried to lose weight over and over again for most of your life, being told that, and to be able to have a baby, you then have to lose weight. Well, it's not as simple as just going to Slimming World or something that this is what the GP was telling me to do, and going and losing a stone or two. It wasn't that simple. So it's quite soul destroying. And I think alongside the same time I was going through this, another one of my friends was going through the same process, yet she wasn't living with obesity. So she went to see her GP like I did, and was basically met with, let's look at doing some testing, some fertility testing, let's find out what's going on, and had a very different conversation than I did. And I just found that really kind of mind-blowing, that there's two people, basically same age, the only difference was our body shape and size, and she was being offered testing and I was just being told to lose weight. So I started exploring other options, thinking, well, if this isn't going to work, what else can I do? So I started exploring IVF, but again was told, my BMI is over 40, we can't help you. So it was quite a worrying time. Next slide, please. However, I was very fortunate that I kept pursuing the situation just naturally, and actually did fall pregnant naturally after 2 and a bit years, and so I know I'm very lucky for that to happen, but obviously that was a positive experience for me. Next slide, please. However, then it was a kind of process of, right, I'm pregnant, so then you go and have your first midwife appointment. So that was interesting. So when I turned up to see her, one of the things she really highlighted to me was, please, we've got to really focus, Sarah, on you not gaining much weight during your pregnancy. So I was like, okay, not quite sure how that's going to work when I'm going to have a baby growing inside me, but yeah, that was the kind of what I was told. And also, the question I got asked straight away was, have you tried Slimming World? Could be quite helpful. And I just thought, have I tried Slimming World? It just really shocked me at how the midwife hadn't understood or got to know my story. So she didn't know anything about my history, kind of all the things I'd been through around my weight historically, and kind of straight away put these kind of pressures on me that I had to then manage my weight, throughout my pregnancy, and kind of put that pressure onto me. And it kind of continued then throughout my pregnancy around scan appointments. So that first time that you're going to see your baby, I remember it really vividly. Going to the hospital, you're really excited, because until you kind of see the baby, for other people that are pregnant, I'm sure they'll recognize this. It's like, you kind of go, well, I know I'm pregnant, but you can't feel anything at that point. So you're a bit like, what's going on? So that scan appointment was really important, because you want to be able to finally see what's in there. So I was excited to go, but it was quite a demoralizing experience, really, because it was one of those where, because obviously I have a larger stomach, they make you kind of lift the stomach up so that they can get the kind of ultrasound down where it needs to be. So obviously already you're feeling hugely humiliating that you're having to lift your stomach up for them to do it. And then it was hard for them to find the baby. She kept saying, oh, because you've got a bit more, weight there, it's a struggle. And kind of really everything was focused on that, my weight, that was the issue here. And, eventually we did get a scan, but it wasn't brilliantly clear. And I just was quite sad and thought, gosh, all of this is all my fault because of my weight, etc. But then again, when I've spoken to various other people that have had scans when they've been pregnant, they haven't been easy to get either. The baby's not always in the right place. But straight away it was made to be, this was my fault that this was like this and not anything else. And I think that's where we need to start thinking differently, is that just changing that language and that whole conversation could have made the experience a lot better for me. And then my first and second trimester were brilliant, really didn't seem to have any issues at all. And then it was my third trimester hit. I had my second gestational diabetes test, and I was diagnosed with gestational diabetes, and then also started getting symptoms of preeclampsia. Now, it was really interesting because I've worked in the diabetes arena for numbers and numbers of years, so know about diabetes inside out. So I was quite shocked how I felt when I got diagnosed with gestational diabetes, because I did feel like a failure. I started feeling like a bad mum, even though I hadn't even given birth. And I was kind of going through a real battle in my head around, I don't want to be on insulin, I don't want to be doing this, I'm really trying to fight it. And I had to have a big conversation with myself, really, about, Sarah, what's more important here? Is the safety of your baby? And actually, if you need to have insulin to control your blood sugars because of what's going on, then that's what you need to do, because that's the right thing for your baby. And I think once I reframed that in my head, and I got some support through IAPT around it as well, because, you know, I was struggling to kind of process this. But it did make me look at it differently, because I kind of thought, yes, it's about the baby, Sarah, it's not about you. Let's just kind of make sure she's okay. And actually what was interesting was my gestational diabetes couldn't be managed by kind of the food that I was eating. So it wasn't what I was eating that was spiking my insulin. It was first thing in the morning and kind of later on at night. So it was that kind of, it was basically all linked to the placenta. It wasn't about anything that I was eating. And I think understanding that kind of blew my mind a little bit as well, was that actually, you know, this isn't your bad choices. This is just the way your body is reacting to you being pregnant. And just manage it, really. And so that's kind of how I reframed it and kind of focused moving forward. And then from 42 weeks, 32 weeks, my slide, I couldn't see it properly. I was in and out of hospital because my blood pressure was just up and down, and I was on medication after medication trying to bring it down. And it just wasn't really happening. So at 35 weeks and 5 days, I was just in for one of my routine blood pressure checks, but my blood pressure was 200 over 180. And this was due to my preeclampsia, and I was told that the baby needed to come out now. So I ended up having an emergency C-section. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, Emily was absolutely fine. She was 6 pounds 9 ounces, so a lovely size, really, and she was born safe and well and didn't need to go into special care or anything like that. So kind of everything from that perspective ended up being fine. And also things like, you know, it was then after the C-section I was told, oh, well, we need to be really careful about the healing of the scar, and because obviously you've got that overlap, but I was really fortunate that everything kind of healed well and ended up being fine. So next slide, please. And as soon as the placenta kind of came out as you give birth, my gestational diabetes just completely disappeared. And again, that really blew my mind, because it just really did emphasize the fact that, you know, this was linked to your body reacting to being pregnant and actually not really about you doing something wrong. And I think that helped me kind of understand all of that a little bit more. I managed to breastfeed as well for 12 months. So I know a lot of people, again, it's like, well, you live with obesity, it's like, oh, will you be able to breastfeed? Yes, you know, you can, you know, not everyone can, but that doesn't, it's not because of you living with obesity. And I am lucky that I have a, you know, healthy, happy little girl. And I think for me, the point that I wanted to make from this presentation and for other people living with obesity is that, you know, don't let your weight stop you getting what you want. If you want to be a mum, don't spend your life like I did, thinking when I'm slim, I will. It's kind of like, I think the thing we need to do is understand the risks. So, you know, people say to me, well, you know, you had gestational diabetes, you were high risk, you know, then ended up having preeclampsia. But the thing is, we can't determine whether that was because of my weight or not. And nobody can, because lots of people get gestational diabetes and preeclampsia and are normal body weight. So I suppose I'll never really know whether that would have happened to me, whether I was a size 10 or the size 24 that I was. And so I think for me, it's like, I just want to empower people to know your risks, but don't let that stop you from wanting to try and have a baby and be a mum, or if that's what you want to do. Because I think that's really important, not putting your life on hold. Like we're living with obesity, we're living in larger bodies, but that doesn't mean we can't do the things we want to do. And being a mummy is the best thing that's ever happened to me. So yeah, I just empower people that if that's what you want to do, please do it. Don't not because you don't think you should or you deserve it or any of those things, because you absolutely do. Next slide, please. So kind of what could have been done differently? So just touching upon my thinking around this is that I think one of the biggest things that we need to do is get society and healthcare professionals to understand the complexity of obesity, to understand that obesity is a disease, that it's hugely complex and that lots of the parameters are completely out of someone's control. We need to treat everyone as individuals, and we need to understand their story, because like I said, my midwife didn't understand my story. So she just gave me this narrative of go and lose weight, and didn't understand what I'd been through historically. We need to have more psychological support for people. And we need to stop blaming everything on size or BMI, because like I say, all of the things that happened to me could have happened to anyone of any body shape or size. So like, let's stop putting that initial blame of, oh, it's because of your weight, because we don't really know that all the time. And we really need to reduce weight stigma and discrimination, is obviously why we're here today, and kind of following on from what Stuart said. Next slide, please. Because I feel like obesity is one of the last acceptable discriminations, and this really needs to stop. And we need to end weight stigma. And I'm just going to show you a clip now on my next slide, which is a little clip from a BBC piece that I did, that I think just kind of captures it a little bit as well. So if we could go to the next slide, please.
In the UK, there are 2.25 million people who are now so big that they need treatment. Diets, etc., just aren't going to work.
People think you're unintelligent, you're lazy, you eat too much, that it's a choice. And I just want to scream and say, none of those things are right.
With each passing year that we fail to get on board with managing the obesity epidemic, it gets exponentially worse.
We'll look back in 10, 20 years' time at the way we've treated people living with obesity and be utterly horrified.
And I think that's the piece I just wanted to finish on, was I think I really hope that we will look back in 10 and 20 years' time and be utterly horrified at the way we've treated people living with obesity, because I really hope we will have moved forward and understand the impact that we have had with the stigmatising language, behaviour and discrimination that we've had. So thank you for your time today, and thank you for inviting me along.